BYU takes down Stanford 27-3. Mitch Harper, Kyle Ireland here from Provo as the Cougars move to 2-0 on the season. Kind of a strange game. We talked about this on Cougar Sports Saturday earlier today. Well, yesterday, I guess technically. We're holding it down here early hours of Sunday morning. But BYU was always in control of this game. They were never stressed, as Kalani Sitake talked about. But, there was a lot more to be had from this game. But BYU, again, comes away 27-3, 2-0 on the season. 24-point victory over a power conference team. You'll take that every day of the week. What were some of your big takeaways, Kyle, from this victory for the Cougars?
Yeah, the game definitely had a weird vibe to it. Kalani mentioned that in his post-game press conference. It did feel weird throughout the whole thing. But biggest takeaway was this defense is outstanding, Mitch. I mean, from the defensive line to the very back of the secondary, this defense played lights out. They shut down the only really effective part of the Stanford offense, which was their running game coming into tonight, and they really just made it tough for them to move the football. Stanford didn't even really threaten BYU at all until the fourth quarter. It was that far out of reach, which did kind of make the weird vibe even more weird because this game was never in question. BYU was going to win this football game from the opening kickoff, but I thought Jack Kelly was spectacular tonight. Keanu Tanavasa, Falatau Satuala, Raider Demouni. I mean, we could go on and on, but this defense showed the talent that they have. And really, I mean, the fact that they've only allowed 3 points through 2 games is impressive.
BYU allows 161 yards to Stanford, 91 of which was in the fourth quarter for the Cardinals. So BYU was dominant, lights out. They got to 14-0. In a very unusual way. I think if you were looking at an ESPN app or some score tracking app, you'd say, oh, BYU scored 2 touchdowns, and they got a 2-touchdown lead going into the half. But as you know, it was far different than that. BYU opened up the scoring tonight with Bear Bachmeier, a 3-yard touchdown. Then there was a failed 2-point conversion, which is a weird alignment. Kalani Sitake said it just wasn't executed correctly. Carson Ryan took a snap. They had all the linemen out to the out. It was a very strange alignment. And then Will Farron booted a 36-yard field goal. Farron also had a 30-yard field goal. And then Falatau Satuala down here in the north end zone had a safety on a screen pass for Stanford. That's how BYU got to 14. Again, 4 different ways to score. That's how they got to 14 points. And then they tacked on a Will Farron field goal on a drive that was a long 13-play drive to open the third quarter. And then Sione Moe had an 8-yard touchdown run, and Stanford almost waved the white flag and just said, we're going to settle for a field goal so we could get points and not get shut out. I thought that was kind of weak by Stanford and for a field goal. And then Will Farron had his 4th field goal of the night, 23-yard field goal. I think BYU, what was disappointing in the first half was that they had 4 drives either at midfield or in Stanford territory to start, and they only end up with 6 points. That was just not good for BYU. They need to get touchdowns. There was the one where you start out on the 5-yard line.
You got to punch that in.
You got to punch that in. Yeah. And Parker Kingston did punch it in, but there was a key and need block, or holding, that was called back and basically put BYU behind the sticks, and they had to settle for a Will Farron field goal. That's just what made tonight a little bit, I don't want to say uneasy, because, again, Kalani was like, they didn't feel stressed. It just, I think what you learned tonight, Kyle, is that you've got an elite defense, as you noted. BYU, outstanding defense. I said in my instant takeaways on KSLSports.com, this will be one of the best defenses in BYU history. And I'm not just talking hyperbole here. You've heard me enough on this show that I know the history of BYU football, and this is an outstanding defense. The personnel is outstanding, excellent. They are going to travel every single game. They will put this BYU offense, if they have an off night, in every game. So we learned that. But we also learned that there's just ups and downs with a true freshman quarterback. And the playbook still feels like it's getting held back a little bit from Bear. Unleash that thing. If he knows the playbook, unleash it and let him cook and operate. I like that 40-yard completion in the fourth quarter, the second half, rather, to Chase Roberts. Maybe that gives BYU some momentum. But there were just missed opportunities for the offense to where you come away from this game feeling like this is going to be a little bit of a work in progress, more so than maybe fans thought after the lights-out performance in week 1 over a bad Portland State team.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, if I'm Aaron Roderick going into the East Carolina game, having a bye week before that, let's take the next 2 weeks and really figure out a way to get Bear Bachmeier in a rhythm. I think that's the biggest thing is we haven't really seen him get into a flow within the game. And even that drive that you mentioned where he had that 41-yard pass to Chase Roberts, he also had another completion that he connected with Carson Ryan for, I think it was 21 yards on that same drive. And so you saw two nice completions in the same series for BYU there. I would like to see, him stack series now. We need to see, from week to week, let's see more improvement throughout a game as opposed to just like game to game, because they really limited him against Portland State. He only threw the ball 11 times, threw it 27 times tonight. So got a little bit more as far as the passing game is concerned there. But I just thought the flow of the game was really off. You mentioned the miscues there, penalties. They will kill you in those red zone situations. And that did hurt BYU tonight. Even if BYU, let's say, they convert a couple of those into touchdowns and, it's a 35-3 game, I actually think that the vibe is still the same.
Sure.
The score wasn't really indicative of anything tonight. They won the game. It wasn't even close. It was just like we've seen BYU operate at such a high level over the last year and a half that you'd expect these teams. And I felt like even in the postgame press conferences, like you felt that from the players, like it wasn't at the level that they wanted it to be, even though they came away with a 24-point win.
It feels like a little bit like deja vu, a little bit. Last year in week 2 against an ACC team, BYU faced SMU. And at that moment, I will say for myself, I thought I was watching two maybe teams that were going to be competing for just bowl eligibility, full transparency. Fast forward to the end of the season, they were both contending for the playoff. SMU got to the playoff, and that became a really impressive win for BYU. Yeah. I'd be stunned, Kyle, if Stanford was in that same, situation like SMU.
Totally.
As Stanford is now 0-2 on the season. I think they're going to be, I don't want to say a bad football team, but they're probably going to end up, I would imagine, 4 wins, 5 wins, maybe they get to 6. I think they could knock some teams off.
That offense tonight, Mitch, it wasn't a lot better than Portland State was a week ago.
I can't believe that Stanford kept Ben Gulbranson, Dr. Ben, in the game. They should have made a change at quarterback. BYU was teeing off on him. 17 of 32 was Gulbranson. 142, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 53% completion rate. Falatau Satuala, who had an excellent game, the safety and an interception late, one of those 2 picks on Gulbranson. I think he hit it on the head when I asked him about the readiness of this defense, led by Jay Hill. He said they knew everything that was coming. They knew everything that was coming. Kalani Sitake kind of set the tone for that messaging of being prepared for everything, because coming off a bye, you kind of expected some new wrinkles. BYU's defense was not faced by anything that Stanford threw at them. Now, on the flip side, I think BYU's offense was a little bit thrown off at times by Stanford's defensive pressures and the blitzes that they threw at Bear Bachmeier. Offensive line has got to fix some of the issues. Waylon Lapuaho, his absence looms a little bit larger than I think you'd like to admit. Left guard spot, you saw a little bit of interchanging with Sonny Makassini. Then you saw Kyle Safarachuk. There's just not that continuity there without Waylon at that left guard spot. Hopefully he can get back sooner rather than later, ideally for that East Carolina game, and get him settled back into that lineup before Big 12 play. But I thought that was a little bit discouraging to see Bear Bachmeier take those unnecessary hits. He had 12 carries on the night for 7 yards. He did have 1 touchdown. But he took a lot of hits tonight, and even Kalani said in the postgame he didn't like that aspect of the game.
I mean, he got sacked 3 times. I mean, that was the same amount of sacks that Gulbranson took from Stanford's point of view. And we're talking about how awesome BYU's defense was. Stanford really, I thought, was teeing off on Bear as well.
At times.
That was the thing for them. They weren't able to shut down LJ Martin at all. BYU was able to run the ball pretty effectively tonight, and so it was really just trying to impact the game through Bear Bachmeier and limiting him.
Let's talk about L.J. Martin. 18 carries, 110 yards. No touchdowns again, 6.1 yards per carry.
He would have had one, but the refs robbed him.
Yes, they did rob him, and that's a great pull. L.J., though, is excellent. Yeah. Kyle, I mean, I know that the opponents aren't great through the first 2 weeks, but he's dominating them the way that he's shedding tackles. L.J. is looking special. Keep feeding that guy the rock. I like that 18 carry number. I would even say get that above 20. There were times in this first half in particular where the offense is completely stalling. Get the ball to LJ. I think good things happen when he touches the football.
Yeah, I mean, you called for another career high performance today, and I think that he was on his way to it. But there were times in this game, Mitch, where I was like, why aren't they running LJ Martin more? Yeah, I really think that they failed him in the BYU offense in a lot of ways by not leaning on that. The fact that Bear threw the ball 27 times, I'm all about that because I wanted to see more of that after not seeing it in game one. But the fact that they were able to run the ball so effectively with LJ Martin, it's like you need to lean on that when you have a true freshman quarterback. That's something that BYU is going to have to do against East Carolina. Their first road experience of the season. Bear's never going to, forget that experience at East Carolina, being on the road for the first time as a starting quarterback in college. And maybe, East Carolina has a big crowd for that game because it's BYU. It's a marquee matchup, all of those things that go into, college football Saturday. And Bear might, have an experience where it's like, oh, like maybe that's a little bit of a shell shock. I don't know. I mean, it's East Carolina to me and you, but we're not the ones on the field. And so being able to have something that's stable and sturdy and solid and consistent like LJ Martin, what he's been able to do through the first 2 weeks, that's something that BYU should hang their hat on week to week. The fact that he's on pace for a 1,300-yard season right now, like lean on that. Get him in the end zone. You need to make that a point of emphasis every single week.
LJ Martin's a special player, and he has been excellent for BYU through the first 2 weeks of the season. He's got 26 carries for 241 yards. I think he's going to only continue to produce for this BYU offense. Bear Bachmeier finished 17 of 27 for 175 yards. The best thing, 0 interceptions. They took care of the football. BYU didn't cough it up. They did have the one punt return from Parker Kingston where he put it on the turf. Second consecutive week, Parker does that. I asked Kalani in the postgame about if he's going to move forward with Cody Hagan at kick return and then Tiger Bachmeier. Both of those guys in the return game had 44-yard returns, oddly enough. But you kind of get the sense, Kyle, where, hey, Parker, like, he is dynamite. He is excellent last season. He was so good. Yeah. I would say he was the best punt return man of the Kalani Sitake era last season. But back-to-back weeks fumbling the football, you've got to take care of the rock. Kalani has always talked about this. When you have the football, the program is in your hands. And when you're putting on the turf, you're letting not only yourself down, but the team down, the program down, the fans down. You've got to take care of that football. And then when Tiger follows that up with his one opportunity and goes off, I think that's up for debate now. That's a competition going forward.
Yeah, I mean, granted, like he didn't lose it tonight. Like he was it was a lost fumble.
BYU recovered it, but that would have been dangerous.
But it would have been. I mean, I think I was on like the 23-yard line.
Oh yeah, that would have been right at the end of the first half, and Stanford would have had a lot of momentum. I don't know if they would have punched it in. I would like to think BYU's defense probably tightens up and keeps them out of the end zone. But still, that would have been a momentum jolt going into the halftime break.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we can't just look at last season's success and just bank that as a reliable thing for 2025. Parker was good last year, and I think that he's even shown some flashes of that same player in the return game throughout the first 2 games of this season. But like you said, the fact is turnovers are so pivotal and key moments in football games. If you win the turnover battle, you're more likely than not to win the football game. And so that one instance, that one play, those handful of plays, they end up being so pivotal and monumental in the outcome of a football game. I just think that BYU, if they're able to limit the mistakes, you mentioned Bear Bachmeier. I think that it seems like maybe the fan base, maybe it sounds like we're down on the performance. I think Bear's been fine. It's not like he's been lights out or anything, but he hasn't been bad either. He looked like a true freshman tonight. And so being able to have him have 0 turnovers, write that up as an A+ for him. But the team around him can't have any of their mistakes amplified when you're also having to have a true freshman quarterback learn the game, learn the offense, understand and see things for the first time.
Well said. And I think that, with Bear Bachmeier, that's just the risk, again, with going with the true freshman. It's not like it was terrible. He took care of the football. There's going to be some great days ahead for Bear Bachmeier. You're going to look back on this and go, man, what a youngster, and he still hammers a Power 4 opponent by 24 points in only his second career start. Because, again, what we talked about throughout the week on Cougar Tracks, Stanford's got individual talent. They just don't have a team right now that probably believes they can win. I think that's the issue that Stanford's lacking. They don't have much of an identity, and let's call it what it is. It's a transition year with an interim head coach who's made it clear he's not going to be part of the program in 2026. So it's an awkward time for Stanford. But I think for Bear long-term, these are going to be days where you're going to look back on, man, he was so green back then, and he's just only going to get better going forward. But there's just growing pains. It happens where you're going to have these moments where he throws some balls and he sells it well over the heads of the receivers. You know, it's unfortunate, too, because he's really developed a nice relationship and chemistry, rather, with JoJo Phillips, and then JoJo Phillips gets banged up. He was in a sling at the end of the first half, and start the second half, he was out. That's going to be something to monitor going forward. Obviously, beginning with the Colorado game, we'll have availability reports for BYU for conference games, but if he's available or not going on the road, can they get by without JoJo potentially against East Carolina? I don't know, because it feels like Bear, that's kind of his number one guy. JoJo Phillips had 7 targets, 3 catches for 30 yards. Chase Roberts, 5 catches, 84 yards, 7 targets. Speaking of Chase, he's got to catch that screen in the red zone. I know that was just eating at him on the 3-yard line. You've got to catch that one,
right
Chase.
In the numbers.
It's right there. Like,
right there.
He's probably just blown away that happened because that's so unlike Chase. And I guarantee he's going to be just kind of kicking himself a little bit. You know, that's just eating at him because that should have been a touchdown. And things like that can help the true freshman out. But as Chase kind of noted, it's taking time. Like, it's the chemistry developing. Just to assume, like, oh, he knows the playbook. He knows everything about this program, this offense. Turnkey, he's ready to roll. Like, it takes time. And that's why I think, in a weird way, this schedule, how it's kind of step by step. FCS, Power 4 that's kind of near the bottom of the ACC. Bye week before a 2-time zone road game. It kind of worked itself out in the long run for a true freshman. But still, you're just going to have some moments where there's going to be some learning opportunities. The nice thing about Bear, and Sione Moa talked about this, how he quickly responds. When he faces some adversity, he responds quickly, and he tries to get it fixed immediately. And I like that about Bear Bachmeier because BYU teams in recent past, when they face adversity, they fold. And I like the fact that Bear Bachmeier responds quickly, and I think that's a good sign for BYU because, again, this is the infancy stage of his career. He's only going to get better, and you got to get those more snaps, more reps, and more opportunities to play.
Yeah, I think that, it was nice to see this performance from him where it's like, okay, maybe it's a B plus kind of a game from Bear Bachmeier, but you win by 24 points. Like, that's an optimal outcome for this team. To feel disappointed by having hat tip to Jerem Jordan, who tweeted this out. This is the 6th best margin of victory for BYU against a power program in I think the last 25 years is what it was since 2000. So, I mean, it was a good performance from BYU overall. But I think that really a lot of things are heightened, especially for this fan base, for us watching an 11-win team from a season ago. Because, I mean, we're talking about Bear as a freshman. I think back to, like, when Zach Wilson was a freshman, when Jaron Hall was a young quarterback. I mean, even going back to the early 2000s with John Beck and the mistakes and the troubles and the miscues of a young quarterback. Like, BYU fans have seen that, and then they've seen those guys flourish and blossom into, all-time program, kind of quarterbacks and have gone on to do great things even at the NFL level. And I think that you look at what BYU can do, for instance, like tonight, I think of the first possession that BYU had. The fact that they were set up on the 40-yard line of Stanford. They went for it on 4th down and 6, I believe it was. Yeah. And they went for it as opposed to, hey, Will Farron, you just made a record field goal a week ago. Let's go out. We're going to kick another long field goal today. We're going to start the game on a note.
That would have been a 57-yarder record, yeah.
And so it's just like, that Will can make that kick. You've seen him make that kick in practice. He made a long field goal, a school record a week ago. Why not trot him out there? You get 3 points, and then you kind of get the ball. The game started off on a weird note there. And so I think that everything kind of trickled on past that.
That's a good point because if you just get 3, it kind of settles the nerves a little bit. There was just kind of that filling out process, I think, for BYU. I did like kind of an underrated aspect coming out of the halftime break. Third quarter, BYU puts together a 13-play drive, 72 yards. Doesn't finish with a touchdown, but still they got points on the board, and you just saw a little bit of that physicality from the offense.
They ran the ball 9 times on that drive, Mitch.
Yes, and I thought, and obviously, too, there were some penalties as well that kind of aided that. There were some early flags in that third quarter, but I thought that BYU, the offensive line in particular, showed their physicality more in the second half. I just felt like that was missing at times in the first half, and I'm maybe being a little hard on them just because I've got high expectations for them. I think Jada and Gentry can be NFL tackles potentially. Like, I think they can get opportunities. And there's just a high standard of the play at the tackle position for BYU. If you play left tackle or right tackle, you're expected to be an NFL guy. That's what the pipeline has been in recent years for BYU. So there's a high standard there, and I think they'll get better going forward. Again, I think BYU will get better. And I like this bye coming now. It's a weird timing because now you're starting to settle into the flow of the season, and then suddenly, now it's a bye. But I think it kind of works for this team. Get healthy. Remember, there were some banged up guys. You still didn't have Tay Nakua. You didn't have Che Bryant-Strother at the middle linebacker spot. Underrated aspect to that. Celia Sarah, clear-cut number one. But then Max Alford, I thought he looked pretty good. Utah State transfer, had some nice pressure that helped free up Keanu Tanavasa, who doesn't need much help, but Keanu Tanavasa on his one sack of the night. Max Alford was bringing some pressure as well. I thought he had a nice night. He's going to be a good one.
How long
for
did
BYU.
it take us to mention Keanu's name? We were going like 20 minutes.
Well, Keanu Tanavasa,
he came free on that, but oh my gosh, he was amazing.
Keanu Tanavasa is excellent. I mean, Tanavasa finished with 4 tackles, 1 sack. He had 1 tackle for loss. Keanu's a beast. And Kalani talked about how high level the defensive line is playing right now. John Talmoipeo. I think Logan Latui had an excellent game as well. 6 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. I mean, we could go on and on. The individual defensive talents. Jack Kelly was brilliant. The closing speed, the athleticism. Dude's an absolute unit. He was great. Forced fumble was excellent. Then Viliami Puha, he recovered it. Viliami went into the medical tent. He did come back later in the game, but that was a positive sign. Isaiah Glasker, I mean, some of the blitzes that Jay Hill was designing, I loved it. It was great defensive execution. You think about Jay Hill, Chad Kahaha, Sione Puha, Gary Anderson, all these names that were just so tethered to Utah. And that defense is here, and it's in full motion. Like, it is going at a high level. BYU is going to have one of the best defenses in the Big 12, and I'm telling you, that gives you a chance to win any ball game because this defense will travel anywhere. And they dug into their depth a little bit, and they still performed at a high level. Falatau Satuela had his best game as a BYU Cougar. I thought Raider Demooney and his interception, it kind of sailed on Ben Goldbranson, but the speed from Raider Demooney on that interception return to get down to the Stanford 18-yard line, I thought that was impressive. Tommy Parasis, some of the pressure that he brought from the nickel spot. I just loved how this defense is playing. And yes, Stanford's offense is not good with Dr. Ben at quarterback, but still, I think BYU's defense, this is for real. This is a really good defense, and they will travel the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the kind of performance that you want to see out of this BYU defense through 2 games against the opponents that they were. You needed to see the numbers, the stats, the limited scoring and yardage from those offenses because that's what good teams do to bad teams. They don't let them hang around. How often do you see, Mitch, where it's like an FCS opponent hangs around this power program and then it's like a 3-point win, or maybe on the rare occasion it's an upset? Those things do happen across the country in college football. BYU wasn't a victim of that. They blew out each of these opponents. It wasn't a close performance last week or again tonight, even though it wasn't a 69-0 win. But going back to the defense real quick, I wanted to get your take on this. We were kind of talking about it throughout the game, but what did you make of the cornerback rotation? We saw a lot of Trey Alexander and Evan Johnson, but Maury Bamba, it seemed like he wasn't on the field maybe as much as we thought coming out of fall camp going into the season.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. We didn't see much of him until, honestly, the third quarter, and it was primarily Trey Alexander and Shmeev, Evan Johnson. That's going to be something to kind of figure out going forward, because I thought that was very interesting because Maury Bamba, as General Guilford talked about, he was the guy taking the throne. He's the number 1 cornerback, and he was just on the sideline with his helmet, and it was just off, and you're wondering, why is Maury not playing? Now, I'm okay with Trey Alexander and Evan Johnson playing because they could be guys that are playing for you in 2026. Maury Bamba, if it's not working out as far as the pecking order, maybe he's a little bit nicked up. Who knows? We'll have to get more info coming up on Monday. But next man up. It's competition every day. Kalani Sitake's program, it sounds so cliche and coach speak, but there really is competition. And we have seen in really every season since Kalani took over, where you will see in the middle of a season, whether it's week 2, week 10, you'll see some subtle change in the starting lineup and go, why is that happening? And really, it might just be in season and competition in practice this guy's performing at a higher level, and this guy's not performing as well. We'll have to see on Maury Bamba what's going on there, but Trey Alexander getting a ton of run, and Evan Johnson as well. Evan Johnson, that was one of my bold predictions on Cougar Sports Saturday, was that he would get a pick. He almost got one. I think it was right here around the 35-yard line area. Evan Johnson's a really good player, and so is Trey Alexander. They're going to be some good players for BYU. And look, Jay Hill's talked about it in the past. Sometimes in this job now, you have to project ceilings, especially at the high school level, but then long-term, too. We've seen it before with the middle linebacker spot where it was projecting the ceilings of Acera and Taggart. Do you project the ceilings of Alexander and Johnson compared to Maury Bamba? Like, I love Maury Bamba. I think he's got a ton of ability. Well, again, we'll see what's the issue here going forward, but to not see him in the first half was a little bit unusual. And again, could be the personnel groupings of this matchup. Maybe they just saw something that said on film, hey, Trey Alexander, Evan Johnson are just a better fit here in this matchup. Again, we'll figure out more, but it was something to kind of take note because we didn't see much of Maury until about the third quarter. We still know Jonathan Cabella at nickel. Tommy Parasis holding down that spot for BYU. So there's been Tavion Beasley got a little bit of run too. So there's been some new faces in that defensive back unit for BYU. Again, a very productive night for BYU's defense. Just some of the numbers again: 19 rushing yards allowed to Stanford. Another stat that kind of caught my attention, Kyle: time of possession. Stanford absorbed the clock against Hawaii. They had so many drives with more than 10 plays. BYU, time of possession, 34 minutes, 56 seconds. Stanford, only 25 minutes and 4 seconds. I think a lot of that was coming in the second half, too, where the game was pretty much out of reach. So, all in all, a really good night for BYU. Again, you want more because BYU feels like they're a team that could reach Arlington, and then that's the goal here. But I just think that nights like tonight highlight that maybe it's going to take a little bit longer than you think. It's going to be a little bit more of a work in progress. But again, if you got a defense like this, you can be in every football game and have a chance. You just got to get this offense getting up to speed more. And I want to see going forward, Aaron Roderick open up that playbook a little bit more in the passing attack for Bear Bachmeier. He knows the playbook. He's a smart guy. Let's see it more. Let's see some more exotic looks on that passing attack. And I like some of the momentum that was maybe built in the second half going into the bye week as they get ready for East Carolina coming up in 2 weeks. Final thoughts here from Provo as the Cougs get it done 27-3.
Yeah, just going off of your point there with unleashing the offense with Bear Bachmeier, I want to see BYU not be afraid to let him make some mistakes, Mitch, because I think that those can become good learning moments. Like this game, last game, East Carolina, like those are games where you can afford, hey, that was a bad interception. Yeah, don't throw it over the middle like that. Or, like those types of things can be taught and learned throughout, practice and the film room. And you want to be able to see that in a game. I'm okay with some game mistakes from Bear Bachmeier. Like, I feel like there has been this sheltered approach throughout 2 games.
Because, again, you've got a defense that gives you a wide margin for error.
Yes, exactly.
Even if you put, again, you don't want to put your defense in a spot where Stanford's taken over in BYU territory in the red zone. But again, I like this defense to be a wall that's going to be hard to get through to get to the end zone. Again, like I just think this defense, you put them in tricky spots, they're going to be okay. They can hold tight and only give up a field goal. So I'm with you. I think just, hey, Bear's going to be okay. Like
if he knows the playbook, if he knows the offense as much as they've told us throughout the last few weeks that he knows and he's up to speed and all those things, then let's see a little bit more of it against East Carolina. That's all I'm asking. I don't need to see more than 27 pass attempts like we saw tonight. I just want to see a little bit different play calling around those 27 pass attempts. I thought that they ran the ball pretty well with him tonight too.
I like that.
I didn't love the sacks and that kind of contact, but the times that Bear actually ran the ball, I thought the play calls were nice. The one touchdown that he had, that QB keeper, that drop,
that guy.
Yeah. And that's what you get with a big quarterback like him, a number 47 wearing quarterback. That's what you get with Bear Bachmeier. So you can continue to do those types of things. But I think in the passing game, I would just like to see a little bit more because you do have Carson Ryan and Chase Roberts who have already shown, hey, like we're your go-to weapons. JoJo, we'll see about that. But there are weapons for Bear. And then again, the run game. I just want to see them lean heavy on that to be able to support Bear in those moments where it's like, okay, we're putting him in third and short situations because LJ is picking up over 3-4 yards a carry.
It's going to be interesting times to see how BYU continues to progress, and I do believe they're going to progress quite a bit between now and East Carolina. It's always tricky to go on the road, but the next game for the Cougs is 2 weeks from now They will go to East Carolina in Greenville.
Hopefully it's
September 20th.
not tricky for us with the travel, Mitch.
Yeah,
Hopefully we don't run into hurricane weather or something.
Yeah, hopefully everything's clear out there on the East Coast. But bye week coming up this week. I think BYU, I would assume, we don't know yet. We'll probably have a Monday press conference, I would imagine, and then kind of a light week. And then it's all systems go the following week, a normal work week for the Cougs, getting ready for East Carolina on September 20th. We'll find out a kick time, I would imagine, probably on Monday, unless the American has, similar to the Big 12, maybe a 6-day window. Remember, again, it's the TV contract for the American that applies to this. So maybe ESPN, maybe CBS Sports Network, who knows? Someone could be picking up BYU, East Carolina. Very curious to see what that kick time looks like for the Cougs and the Pirates. And also kind of a unspoken thing we did before we get out. Do you think they get into the AP Top 25 tomorrow or today?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of people probably didn't watch this game, Mitch.
I hate that reasoning, though.
Let's just call it for what it is, because that really, I mean, there is that bias. I do think that I'm going to have to go back and look at what happened throughout the rest of the country throughout today. You saw Michigan lose at Oklahoma. I don't know how far they fall out, and maybe they're on the edge of the top 25. They probably stay ahead of BYU since they were ranked in the teens, so even with a loss there. But, I mean, I think that maybe after another win, it's going into Big 12 conference play. If they're 3-0 at that point, then I think that you can probably bank on them being a top 25 team.
I'm okay with them not being ranked if they're not, but just don't tell me that you didn't watch the game and that's your reasoning for not ranking them. I don't want to hear that. Like, if you have conviction as a voter, hey, I don't want to rank BYU. They didn't look great against Stanford. Fine, that's your opinion. That's,
the
that's
problem
the great
is
thing
they
about
don't follow the rules, Mitch. They don't take a blank slate into every week and vote according to that week. They don't do it, and you know it's true.
You got to tear it down, and you can't just justify your ranks from the previous week. You got to tear it down and start anew every single week. Hopefully, pollsters do that, because to me, then you just base it on resume through this week, through week 2. Who's got some of the great resumes?
If they did that, then BYU is a top 20 team.
Yeah, I think BYU's defense, and then the sheer dominance,
2 wins,
from
3
a point
points
margin
allowed.
standpoint, I think you rank them. You beat an ACC team. Like, what more do you got to do to get ranked? I mean, again, I'm fine if BYU doesn't get ranked, because it all plays itself out. When you're in a league like the Big 12, you don't have to be ranked. Everything's still in front of you to accomplish your goals, but
we don't care about rankings till November anyway,
From
Mitch.
a perception standpoint, if the sport is still going to have these early season rankings, you want to be in the club, and you want to get that perception and those eyeballs that come with having a number next to your name. So we'll see if BYU slides into the rankings. We'll find out about 10 a.m. Mountain Time, I believe, is usually when the rankings come out. Maybe that's 12 new Mountain. We'll figure it out here coming up on Sunday later today.
It's almost 2 a.m., Mitch. It's almost 2
a.m. Let's
the
get
brains
out.
are shutting down. I haven't had enough caffeine tonight to keep me awake.
Let's have a little cheers there.
Cheers to another good game. And
another
point,
Kyle.
just to close it out from my end. We are a third of the way done with the home schedule, Mitch. That's kind of depressing.
That is
the depressing point of the night. So 2/3 of the way to go.
Cougar Nation showed up in a big way. Biggest crowd since 2007.
Beat last
2007
week.
Utah game. Huge crowd. Electric atmosphere once again for BYU and Stanford here at LaVell Edwards Stadium. So signing off, BYU takes down Stanford 27-3. We will have coverage throughout the upcoming week on Cougar Tracks, KSLSports.com, KSL Sports YouTube, and then you can hear both of us on Cougar Sports Saturday, next Saturday from noon to 3 on the legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio. Talk to you then.